AT&T believes that your phone is part of what makes you, you. So we understand why you're holding it as you eat those cheesy snacks on the go, while you listen to your favorite podcast on the subway, or when you video call your best childhood friend from your favorite concert. Nothing should come between you and your connectivity. AT&T 5G is fast, reliable, and secure, and it keeps you connected to family, friends, fun, everything you care about. You'll enjoy fast speeds while you download apps, share your favorite videos, or get your game on. We know you don't let that phone out of sight, much less your grip. But no matter, this is a no judgment zone. AT&T wants to ensure that you can stay connected to what matters most to you, so you can prioritize yourself. Requires compatible plan and device. Coverage not available everywhere. Learn more at att.com/5G for you.
This is Holly Fry from Stuff You Missed in History class. Toyota is a leader when it comes to electrified vehicles. Today, battery EVs make up less than 10% of new vehicles sold because of higher cost and concerns about range and charging. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. With an electrified, diversified lineup of hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and battery EVs, Toyota empowers you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/beyondzero. Toyota, let's go places.
It's time. Time to get credit for the work you've done. Time to get the recognition you deserve. With Purdue Global, you can move forward in your career, for your family, and for yourself. You're worth the investment in yourself to earn a degree you're proud of, a degree that employers will respect. Purdue's online university is designed to support working adults like you who know it's never too late to accomplish your goals. It's never too late to make a comeback. It's time to start yours today at purdueglobal.edu.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, sponsored by Soundring. Visit jabberjawmedia.com for more shows like this one.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Title Fight and their critically acclaimed record Hyperview. You know these guys. I interviewed Ned, a couple months ago. Great band. Love what they're doing. Thank you to Anti-Records for jumping on as a sponsor. Listen to the record. You can buy it on iTunes. You can stream it through any of your favorite streaming service providers. And check out the record Hyperview. It's really, really, really good. I promise. Today's podcast is also sponsored by the amazing people at Loot Crate. So Loot Crate is an amazing subscription box service that ships you incredible gifts. Like, if you are a pop culture fanatic, if you also like, video games and all that sort of stuff, trust me, this is the subscription box for you. You can visit lootcrate.com/words and enter the code WORDS to save $3 off of your initial subscription. They have amazing stuff from huge licensed properties like, Walking Dead, Legend of Zelda, all that sort of stuff. This month, Star Wars. That's all I'm going to say. So visit lootcrate.com/words and you'll save $3 off your first box. It's like having a best friend that ships you the coolest stuff imaginable. So do it up. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins, ever present to bring you some interesting and intimate conversations with people in and around the independent music scene that are doing cool stuff, have done cool stuff, continue to do cool stuff. And this guest is exactly that. Colin Frangicetto. I've never said his last name out loud, so I'm probably butchering it. But Colin, he plays in a band called Circa Survive. Used to play in a band called This Day Forward, which is where I met him many a moon ago when our bands used to tour together and have a lot of fun times out on the road. So, I'll bring that conversation to you in a moment. A few things out of the way. How was your holiday? I didn't ask you. I apologize. It was good? Awesome. I'd love to hear that. Mine was really good. I got to eat a ton of veggie turkey and mashed potatoes and stuff my face with things that, realistically just made my belly swell and swell and swell to the point of where I'm like, I ate too much food. And I hope everybody had that nice, warm feeling of just, being a glutton, because realistically, that's kind of what this holiday is all about. Removing the political ramifications that obviously many people have issues with. Really, we just eat a whole lot of food, and that's kind of it. So I hope that you enjoyed that, and I hope that you got to spend some time with the people that you actually care about, So, and if you got to spend time with people you didn't care about. Hopefully that was painless and minimal. So I have to also mention the beautiful, beautiful people at Jabberjaw Media. They have launched a podcast network, which this show is a part of. And over the course of the next couple of weeks, I want to highlight some of the shows that are a part of that network as well, because ultimately what we're trying to do is increase awareness of all each other's shows to be able to... Did you hear that burp? I apologize. That just kind of snuck out of me. But we want to bring some awareness to what's happening out there in the audio medium. And one show in particular I want to make you privy to is a show called Bad Christian. So I know some of you immediately write the show off because it says Christian, and you're like, oh, I don't want to listen to like religious jibber jabber. It's not that. It's my good friend Matt Carter, who plays in a band called Emery, and one of his fellow bandmates, and one of their other good friends, who basically just kind of chop it up. They hang out, they talk, they also have a guest on, and they have really, really hard-hitting conversations with these people. Ask them about uncomfortable things, and obviously, spirituality and religion is obviously a large part of the show, but great dialogue. I couldn't recommend it any higher, so please dive into the Bad Christian Show, and thank you to Jabberjaw Media, and thank you to Soundring for making this network launch as cool as it has. So hopefully you're all checking that stuff out. And, so like I said, Colin, very close friend. He's been a guest that I've had circled on my to-do list for quite some time, and finally we were able to sync up. It was I really appreciate it when people who I'm speaking to kind of paint the visual of what's happening with them. And he was like, I'm parked in a parking lot in front of a Barnes & Noble that I spent a lot of time in here on the East Coast when we were, writing records and doing all that sort of stuff when he needed his own alone time. So I appreciate that, So here's Colin in a car and me getting really intimate and deep with him, and it was a great conversation. So I'll talk to you more after the end of the conversation and kind of wrap things up in a bow. So here is Colin. I have a very funny memory of obviously the very first Take It This Day Forward tour.
Of course.
Where you guys hauled ass across the country to meet us.
Yep.
I think you missed one show because you had van problems, but then you basically showed up in Ventura or Thousand Oaks, that general area.
Yep.
And like literally loaded straight from the van after driving for 50 some odd hours.
Yes.
Yeah, and then loading all of your equipment inside to the stage, and it was one of those things where like all I knew was Mike and Vadim, and so then meeting the rest of you for like 4 seconds, it was just like, oh, let's see how this goes, and then you guys played an awesome set. It was just one of those things where I was like, wow, that's hard to do. It
was very conducive to playing those songs. I mean, just getting out of the van and just wanting to just totally kill people. We're just so frustrated. It was the biggest clusterfuck of like a week, and then culminating to that moment of getting out of the van. And I remember I'm pretty sure I just jumped on someone else's drums. I don't know.
Yep.
But yeah, that was hysterical.
It was. I mean, it was definitely indicative of the times that we were touring back then. But it was very. But do you, reflecting on those times, like, do you look back like with nostalgia, or do you look back? Are there certain times where it's just like, oh yeah, I'm glad that's in the past. I'm glad that happened, but I don't want to relive that in some capacity.
Oh man, I think maybe a little bit of both. I think I've reflected pretty deeply on all those experiences, throughout the last decade or so, being in Circa. It's really very, very clear to me that we would never have existed if it weren't for This Day Forward, and at least not in the capacity that we do exist. And, so many very important lessons and experiences that happened within This Day Forward, and just really, I mean, I can trace it all the way back. It's very, very strange, but even before This Day Forward, Crucial people, just meeting them and getting into hardcore and punk rock and stuff, and then just really, I feel like being inspired by the right people and how they did things, and a certain kind of mindset I think carries through all the way to now. Even being in a band that obviously we're not really part of a hardcore scene. I don't even really know what a hardcore scene is anymore or any of that stuff, but it's very, I feel like we still use, and I still use like a lot of the mentalities that we used back then.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really important point, because like whether or not you feel particularly connected to whatever the scene you grew up with, it's the principles and the foundation that you build that, lead you throughout life, that you just like, you're like, dude, if you didn't trip across this when you're, 14, 15, like you never would have known that you could build this stuff on your own.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So were you, I don't know where you were born and raised. Were you born in the Philly area, or where were you?
Yeah. I was born in Abington, Pennsylvania, and that's like, right outside of Philly and kind of like bordering on the suburbs area. But it's still kind of within that northeast Philly range. And and I grew up this kind of in Bucks County, which is like right outside of Philadelphia. And my mom worked in northeast Philadelphia, so I found myself going there quite a bit. And then even when I was very young, I my mom would drop me off at the babysitters. I had different people like watched me and my brother when we were younger. So I spent a lot of time in northeast Philadelphia when I was really, really young. And then as I grew up, I guess became a bit more like suburban centric to like high school and all that stuff. But always kind of felt very part of the city in my young life, just taking the train to go see shows and stuff all the time, and spent probably 5 days a week down there. At like once a certain age hit, I was just down there like most of the time seeing shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember being struck by like how that entire area, like obviously every time that we came through and stayed with the Shaws, and like seeing that general area, it was just always so surprising to me, where it was like, obviously it was just like one giant suburb, but at the same time, it's like there was obviously a ruralness about it that I was just like, I don't know, it was very, I guess, idyllic in a way that I just couldn't really, being from the suburbs in Southern California, it was just kind of like, oh, this is like what a suburb, I guess, is meant to be. Not everyone's stacked on top of each other.
Right.
Yeah.
There was definitely a lot of, especially back then. I mean, there was a lot of space and a lot of like, a lot of nature, and but you could find yourself smack dab in the middle of like a town square situation really fast. But nature and like open fields are never far away, which is pretty nice. Yeah,
no, for sure. And so, what was your family structure like? I know you mentioned your brother and your mother, but who was all in the house?
Oh yeah, it was. I had a really great childhood. My mom and dad, they're still together, and then I have a younger brother who's 2 years younger than me, and then I have a younger sister who is, I think, a little maybe 8 years younger than me, 10 years younger than me. But I think we had a great childhood. Just like when I was really, really young, it was just very just totally like a kid's paradise. Like just my brother and I, having a sibling so close in age, I always had somebody to play with. And we had, at a certain point started having a lot of kids that were in the neighborhood too. So, we just always had something to do. I feel like we're just always outside, like building forts and just being dirt balls,
right.
It was a great time.
What did your parents do for a living?
Well, my dad he's a professor of psychology at a community college, which is pretty insane. It's about 2 hours away from here, in Northampton, which is like Bethlehem area. So he would do a 2 hour commute to and from his school, probably 4 times a week. And then my mom was a social worker in Philadelphia, working with families that have like a mental retardation and, handicaps, and then all the way to like just people that have just issues at home. And so she was like a kind of like in the field social worker when I was really young, and then she kind of like moved her way up, and even to this day, she still is like she kind of runs the joint at this point. You know, she doesn't really do the hands-on stuff anymore, but so yeah, that was really interesting. They're both coming from like a psychology background, very cerebral people.
That you saying that word literally took it out of my mouth, because I was going to describe you as such a little bit later on in the interview.
Oh, that's funny.
Where you, because you, and we could, jump right into that, but it's like you always struck me, obviously in the large amount of time we spent together on the road, where you always struck me as a person who, I mean, obviously you were social and, you didn't section yourself off from everybody, but you seemed very comfortable, kind of, being alone, and also being in your own head, in ways that other people, I think, I identified with you on that, because I also, I feel very comfortable with those same sort of thoughts. And so I was always like, oh yeah, Colin's on that level. So now I can see the sort of, lineage of that, where it's like, oh yeah, you can be comfortable doing this on your own.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, that's a great, that you took notice of that. I think as you would know, being someone who's similar, that can be easily misinterpreted in a lot of ways. And I feel like there have been many times in my life where I've been just kind of like, maybe labeled as like antisocial, or even like, I don't know, grumpy, or I don't know. But yeah, that is a lot of it, just kind of in my own head, and reflecting on things, especially in that kind of environment when you're just constantly moving from place to place and things are happening at such a rapid rate. It's sometimes it just takes me a little bit I'm just trying to absorb everything and kind of like catch up.
Sure. Yeah, that's true. Like you're very you're deliberate. Like your actions definitely, I guess it felt a certain weight to them, where it's like, oh yeah, like Colin's thought this through, and like this isn't, extremely impulsive. I mean, everybody's impulsive to a certain extent, but I definitely, I can see where you're coming from in regards to that, where it wasn't just shoot from the hip 24/7.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so then how did you, obviously being the sort of, the trailblazer in your family, as far as your, brothers and sisters were concerned, how did, like independent music start to infiltrate you? Because, usually it's like an older brother or sister that kind of shows it to you. So where'd you discover it?
Yeah. I think it was all, it's just like that weird, trickle down effect, where it was like, at a very young age, my dad introduced us to rock and roll. And we were just obsessed with music. It was always playing. Like it was almost like I can remember in the summers especially, it being a daily occurrence when my dad would just play records and my brother and I would just be flipping out, like jumping around and listening to stuff. And at a pretty young age, I remember, I think my real introduction to like the concept of independent music, and just that there was something to be like sought out and found, happened ridiculously young age. Like in 6th grade, I remember being over my friend's house, and I had this total crush on his older sister, and she just seemed so cool to me. And normally she was in and out of the house, like, never even around. And I'd just be like, oh my God, where's she going? Why isn't she hanging out with us? And,
right.
But I remember she had gotten grounded for sneaking out and going to a Ween concert. And so she was, kind of stuck hanging out with, her younger brother and me. And she was like, just kind of like playing all this wild, weird alternative music. And she played me a bootleg recording that she had recorded, at a bar of a Pearl Jam concert before 10 had ever even come out. And she's playing me this, and they're like playing like Dirty Frank and all these weird songs that didn't even wind up being on 10. But like, I was like, what is this? Like, this is amazing. And I was obsessed with it immediately. And I remember, as soon as 10 came out, I bought the CD, or maybe even a cassette. I can't remember. I know at one point I had both, but that was one of those weird times where you're like, well, I don't have enough money for the CD. I'll just buy the cassette. And like, it didn't even matter at that point. It wasn't like a full on switch yet, but, yeah. So I think that was pretty huge, because she was already going to like, she was like underage and going to bar shows and stuff. And she wasn't doing it to like for the alcohol or anything like that. It was just her and her friends were obsessed with bands, and especially finding out about bands that weren't really big yet. And I thought that it was really cool that she had this thing that she had recorded herself of some band that eventually wound up being, ginormous. And,
yeah. That's so, I love that description, because it's like so many of us can kind of point to these really random small moments where it's like there had to be like 7 things that lined up in order for you to be in the same room with her and playing stuff that's just like, like, I mean, Ween is, well, not, I mean, obviously she wasn't playing you Ween right away, but like the stuff was challenging, but you knew that it tickled something inside of you. It's so rad.
Which is so funny, because just those 2 touchstones right there really, like, they splinter off like insanely from that point, because the Pearl Jam thing, I became obsessed with them, and then they became huge, and then like Pearl Jam's doing this tour, and they did this thing where every single city they hit, they took over the radio station at night afterwards, and they DJ'd, and they played whatever they wanted. And like, when like, that's where I got turned on to like, everything DC, like Fugazi, Minor Threat, like, Bad Brains, like just all that stuff was being played on those pirate radio shows that they were doing after the shows. And like, I was like, oh, what is all this, And I remember just like that, I was slowly getting, I think I had just played my Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath records, like just enough to the point where I was ready for something else. It was like the grunge stuff was cool. I thought it was cool that like grunge kind of like almost was like inspired by a lot of classic rock. So I had soaked up all the classic rock, and I was just like, I was a sponge. I just wanted more and more and more. And then, once you find Minor Threat, it just kind of like everything changes from that point.
Right.
And
like everything I knew was gone.
Yeah, and ironically, the Ween thing, I wound up becoming really, really tight with my art teacher in high school later down the road, because I knew Ween, and because Ween Dean was her husband, which is crazy, because Ween was from this area. They're from New Hope. So it was like, it was just very strange, which like that art teacher taught me a lot about art. So it was just very strange how those 2 things specifically from that one girl, Erica Boyce, if you're out there, thank you.
Right. It's so rad that, yeah. It's just, you never know where those random things will take you.
Yeah.
So, and then as you started to, go in high school and start to develop more of, yourself and figure out who you were in the world, what kind of kid did you find yourself being? Were you focused on school, or were you more attracted? Obviously, music was kind of consuming you at that point.
Yeah, music. By high school, music was huge. I think my first bands happened in middle school, like when I was pretty young, probably like a year after that Pearl Jam incident, but they weren't really, it was just like me and a couple kids who also liked grunge music, like playing like weird versions of that. And like, I think a lot of them happened to be Jewish. So we wound up playing a lot of bar mitzvahs that year.
Shut the fuck. Get out of
yeah.
Dude.
Oh, totally.
I didn't know, like, because I mean, usually you hear about the sort of, whatever junior high school talent show, but so you were doing that like bar mitzvah circuit.
Yeah, I mean, the way in my mind, I don't think was the reality. I think realistically, it was like, okay, like you guys can get up here and play a couple songs, and like we did, but like I don't think we were like, we definitely weren't the band for the bar mitzvah. At least not that I can remember. But that's what's funny, I think about those early times of like my first couple bands, and even the bands after that we were really like focused on writing original music. I can't remember a single song of it. And when I think about how many songs we had and how many notebooks filled with lyrics, because I was just singing at that point. Like I was just the singer, and I can't even think about having a moment of anxiety over anything. It was just like so easy and so fun, and nothing like, there was just never a moment where I was like, oh, that isn't good enough, or that isn't this. It was like you could turn anything into this fun, rad song. And I'm sure it was absolute dog shit if you listen to it now, but like at the time, it didn't matter.
Yeah, no, I really like that description where you didn't have, you're at that weird age where you're not overly self-conscious, but, and like you said, everything's fun and you're just putting it out there because like, you're like, well, hey, I got my friends and we're doing this.
Yeah.
Did you have
it was so pure, you know?
Right. Did you have a name for the project?
Oh my God. The first one I really think about in that way was called Nascent.
Okay.
So like, it's just such a young band name. Like you're like, oh yeah, we're just looking up. We're obviously throwing darts at a dictionary. Like that's what's happening.
Totally.
And I feel like there was probably like 3 or 4 bands like that in that era that were all that kind of stuff. Just like we were all like, you know, it was very grungy sounding, but very like, I don't even know how to describe it, man. I mean, like we would get into like Dinosaur Jr. and stuff like that, and then try to just kind of like, I definitely remember trying to sound like Dinosaur Jr. a lot, like guitar wise, and even you know, not so much the really low voice stuff, but his more falsetto stuff I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's cool. You had that experience. So you were just solely focused, like as you started to, you know, like you said, go into high school and everything. Like just basically, the band life was the life that you wanted to lead.
You know, I think it went in waves. It came first early, and then I kind of think I gave it up for a bit there because I became like, I was kind of lost there for a bit, hung out with some kids that were just like really into drugs and really into just like skateboarding and just being, you know, not what, you know, you're supposed to do. Like that was just basically the kind of kids I was hanging out with for a few years. And I think ironically, what kind of turned me around was taking LSD, which is like really funny that, you know, taking such a mind altering drug would like shoot me back in a more positive direction, but it did really wake me up. And I think I mean, the way I think about it now, like my personality was pretty profoundly changed after that first experience with that, which was like, you know, like 10th grade or something like that. And, yeah, just very, oh shit. No, actually the first time I took acid was 8th grade, and it was like this 2-year transition of changing into a more, I think, quiet, more positive, like not trying to get in trouble, and that's when I really started seeking out like knowledge and books and just in general, like more thought-provoking material all across the board. And you know, I think later in high school, I was even like trying to find a niche to fit into, and I fell into like journalism and like the newspaper and stuff. And I was still like obsessed with music at this time. I was always obsessed with listening to music, but I think for a little bit there, I almost kind of like gave up the ghost with like trying to be in bands and stuff. But that's when I found like Converge and all that whole underground scene that was really just very empowering, and it was really kind of exploding in our area, like all these like DIY shows and like Stalag 13 in Philly and the Kill Time, these very, very underground, like you know, basically like hollowed out shitty apartments in West Philly that they were putting on shows for like $5. And that just like, I would go to those shows, and then for journalism, I would go to like the big concerts and cover them, like, and write about them or whatever. But I was always trying to figure out like, how could I like write about Boy Sets Fire? Like, how could I write about this, you know, like, cause that was really my obsession. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just rambling at this point.
No. Well, I see the lineage of what you're talking about. It's just funny that obviously the ping pong evolution in regards to So I tripped on acid and I took LSD, and then that set me in the positive direction, like you said. Because like typically, you hear the stories of people going the other way when, especially at a young age, where they're not, their brains are obviously not ready to handle something so profound as that experience.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and I've thought about it a lot over the years because, I almost for a long time didn't ever want to really talk about my drug use and like things of that nature, especially hallucinogenics, because I do feel like they can be very dangerous for some people, and especially if you have like mental health issues in your family. And I've definitely seen some horror stories happen, but like I guess for me the sad thing is that for me, it was completely the opposite, and very, hallucinogenics really opened me up and made me kind of realize the fragility of life and how like you can really make your own reality in a lot of ways, as far as just committing to ideas and, working hard and being able to live like with small means. I think that's all the kind of stuff that I think I could have learned that on my own, but for whatever reason, doing acid kind of like ripped everything away, like all like the silly like brands of clothing and all the stuff that just kind of seemed like so important for a while there to kids in school, and all that stuff just kind of melted away, and I could kind of just see that like life was way bigger than all this stuff. And that had a huge influence on me.
No, it's right. I mean, it's awesome because you never know how a person is going to arrive at that, thinking greater than themselves sort of scenario. And it's like sometimes it does take these really, influential moments, whether it is, drug induced or otherwise.
Absolutely.
In near-death experience, like all these things can happen to a person, but it's like it's fortunate that you were obviously able to, wrangle that and use it in a positive manner.
Totally.
And so then when you started playing in This Day Forward, was that basically after high school?
That was right at the end.
Okay.
I met Mike Shaw when he was a senior and I was a junior. And, I basically met him and Mike Colin at the same time. They were in my gym class, and we were both wearing like hardcore band shirts, in gym class. And I remember Golan always tells me the stories of like how like him and Shaw used to like talk about me, like, who's that asshole? Like they would kind of like make fun of me. Like, who's that dickhead in the chokehold shirt? Like right. What the hell is his problem? Like, it was kind of like, I don't know. It was just, but it's funny because we were probably like the smallest percentile of like the high school that would listen to any of those bands. It was obviously, we should have been amazed that the other ones were listening to what we were listening to. But for whatever reason, our first inclination was like, oh, that's obviously my arch enemy over there.
Totally.
But
you had to be standoffish with one another.
Yeah, which is, I don't think Shaw ever played a part in that because he's just like a jokester and didn't really ever care. But for whatever reason, with very little effort, we became very good friends. I think we just like wound up we were in the same group at some point. And then it just was like, once you connect over that kind of stuff, it's like, oh, well, we should probably hang out. And then they were like, yeah, like we're thinking about starting a band, like a band like Converge or something like that. And I was like, whoa, I want to be in a band like that. And they were like, well, we kind of have everything covered. We just need a drummer. And I was like, I was like, well, I have a drum set and I played snare drum in elementary school. So I guess I could try.
Good. Right.
Yeah. So I basically faked my way through it and just kind of like taught myself drums, like to start playing with those guys.
That's I love it. Usually a lot of those bands, like obviously forming around that time, were totally just out of necessity in regards to the instrument played, where it's just like,
absolutely,
it's like, Nick, who plays obviously in Circa, like he didn't play bass, but we were just like, hey Nick, do you want to join Taken? Like, do you know 6 strings, you can play 4. And it's like so many people just fall into it like that. Yeah, it's beautiful. And you always struck me too, like with the I guess when This Day Forward obviously started to, tour more and become more known outside of your area, it seems like you and Vadim were kind of the two-headed beast in regards to handling sort of the business of it, because you were always very, Vadim was maybe executing booking shows alongside of you, but then you guys kind of, worked together in regards to that. Was that a role that you, I guess, kind of took to initially because you were interested in it, or was it something that kind of just like fell on you?
Oh my gosh, yeah, totally. All just in my head, it's all happenstance and just whatever was necessary, And I think again, stuff that my parents had kind of like instilled in me, communication wise and just thinking wise, like enabled me to kind of just be a communicator for the band. I didn't mind it. I didn't mind, like, if we needed to ask somebody for something, I wouldn't mind being that person. Or like if I somehow struck up a conversation with somebody who ran a record label, I wouldn't, be shy about saying like, hey, we kind of would love to do something with you. Like, how about you give us a shot? Like, or like someone was like, oh, I know somebody that records bands in his garage. Like, I would go that extra step of trying to track that person down and getting that number and then calling that person and booking that. And, it wasn't necessarily that it was my duty, but I'm not sure that anyone else would have done it, but I certainly didn't mind doing it, and it was exciting to me, all of it.
This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me tell you, the holidays are awesome. They've got some great moments, whether it's spending time with friends and family, gift giving, all of the things. I personally love Christmas lights. Like, I can't wait to put them up. It just makes me feel warm inside. But there are moments where it's like, man, it's overwhelming, or I'm feeling really alone or sad. All of the things that just, can kind of compound it during the holidays. That is why you need to take a beat and maybe take that moment for yourself. Give the gift of time to yourself. And that's honestly why I love dipping into therapy. That's why I also love working with BetterHelp, because they make finding a therapist online so dang easy. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Like I said, it's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and then you get matched with a licensed therapist. And you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Please, in this season of giving, give to yourself as well with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off of your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Ray for 10% off your first month. Take care of yourself, please.
We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way, but we also know ABEV is not for everyone, whether it's because of cost, range, or concern about finding a charging station when you need it. Plus, the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future. In vehicles and in manufacturing plants, too, in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you. A hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So, shop. Learn more and get details at toyota.com/Beyond Zero. Toyota, let's go places.
When you get a new car or a new home, your first reaction might be to say things like, oh yeah, or I can't believe it, or booyah. But what you really want to say is the one thing that can get you the help you need. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm is there with coverage you need for your car, your home, and even boats, motorcycles, RVs, and other things that matter to you. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it feels good knowing you can find what fits for you. And when you need ways to get help, State Farm gives you options there too. In person or on the phone, with your local agent, or on statefarm.com, or their award-winning app. State Farm lets you do things your way. So, when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
This episode of the show is brought to you by Loot Crate. You heard me at the very beginning of the show talk about Loot Crate, and it's amazing because they've come on as a continual sponsor of the show, which means they love independent music and culture. And so let me explain a little bit more about what they do in order to get you just ready to plop down your hard-earned cash for some amazing stuff. So basically, if you're like into geek, gamer culture, pop culture stuff, this is absolutely essential for you. So for less than $20 a month, you get 6 to 8 items of gamer and pop culture licensed gear, apparel, collectibles, and unique one-of-a-kind items that you will never find anywhere else. Make sure to head to lootcrate.com/words and enter the code WORDS to save $3 off any new subscription. I am giving you money. That's basically what I'm doing. So I'm going to read a little ad text here to kind of get you hyped up and get you in that mind frame of what they're servicing you this month. So, not that long ago, and depending on where you live, not so far away, Loot Crate blasted off into a voyage across the galaxy, searching for the far reaches of space and to find universally awesome gear. Using December's Star Wars The Force Awakens loot as the launch pad, we landed on some equally cosmic items from Halo 5 and more, with an exclusive Funko Pop and exclusive shirt in this month's crate. This is the loot you're looking for. So, like I said, that was their ad text, and I wanted to read it to get you in that exciting mind frame. I mean, you're talking about huge properties, limited edition stuff. It's great. So basically, it's like, you know, your best friend, the guy or girl that's sitting next to you that's probably listening to this show. It's basically them being like, I know exactly what you want. I'm going to send you this thing once a month, and you're going to open the box, and it's going to be full of goodies, and you're going to just be so stoked on life when you open this box full of amazing stuff. So you have until the 19th of this month at 9 p.m. Pacific to subscribe and receive that month's crate. And when the cutoff happens, it's over. It's done. You're never going to get that box or those items ever again. So go to lootcrate.com/words, enter the code WORDS to save $3 off your new subscription today. Do it. It helps supports the show, and you'll get some rad stuff in return. Thanks, Loot Crate. Okay, I promise, this is the last interruption before we get back into our discussion with Colin. But this is a very good interruption because what I'm going to give you is rad stuff. So how am I going to do that? There's something called Audible. So, you know, you're busy. You've got so much stuff going on. You're driving all over the place. You're working full time. Maybe you got some kids. Maybe you got some extracurricular activities. There's so much stuff you have to do that by the time you get around to being like, hey, I want to read this new awesome book that came out, or hey, I want to revisit one of my old favorite classics, you've got no time to do it. Or you do it like 2 minutes before you go to bed and fall asleep after reading a page. Fret no more. Audible is the world's leading provider for audiobooks, broadcasters, entertainers, magazine and newspaper publishers with over 180,000 audio programs. It's unbelievable. Their app is free, and it works on iPhones, iPad, Android, and Windows Phone. You can also download and listen to it on your Kindle Fire and over 500 MP3 players. Did you even know there was 500 MP3 players? Unbelievable. And unlike a streaming or rental service with Audible, you yourself own your books, so you can access them at any time, anywhere, right from your smartphone. And Audible, they're just such great people because what they have is they have the Great Listen Guarantee. If you decide that the book that you chose you didn't like, return it. No worries. No questions asked. You can exchange any book for another title. It's amazing. My wife is crazy because she reads books, and even if she doesn't like the book, she still tries to finish it. I promise you, if I were like, hey, you know, if you listen to this on Audible, you can just return it like halfway through it if you think it stinks. And no questions asked, they'll give you the new one and of whatever you want. She would probably take me up on that offer. I have to recommend one of my favorite titles that I listened to maybe about a year or so ago. Ready Player One. I read the book, and I heard that the audiobook was an even better experience. So I dove right in. It's narrated by Will Wheaton, and it's probably one of my favorite books of all time. It's an amazing sci-fi video game nostalgia trip that will have you engaged from minute one of listening to the audio. So, Ready Player One. The author is Ernest Cline, and it's narrated by Will Wheaton. You know, Star Trek Next Generation. He's a dude that's been around. You'll recognize his voice. So, and just for the listeners of this show, Audible is offering a free 30-day trial membership. Go to audible.com/100 words today to start your free trial. Again, please show your support for the show and get a free 30-day trial at audible.com/100 words. Do it up, get smart, read books. Now here's Colin.
You definitely seemed like, if I were to just as an outside observer, it seemed like there was, you kind of were, for lack of a better term, more of a big picture, where it's like you would be, like you said, you would be talking to the record labels and stuff, and Vadim would also do that as well, but he would be executing kind of the more, he would know the promoters where you would know the record labels. Like it seemed like that was kind of,
he loved doing the day-to-day stuff. Like he was so good at doing the booking stuff and communicate. There's just so much tedious stuff that had to go into booking those, as you would know, and like it's very time consuming, but like again, like he never minded doing that. He was really into doing that, and I think he even liked nerding out on like distance between shows and looking at maps and like all that stuff, trying to plan out, and then how much friendship means to Vadim. So like being able to plan out a visit with friends in one place and knowing that you'll get to see these other people on the next day. And, it's just like planning a vacation, but in the same sense that you're like, it started to slowly become, because in the beginning, and I'm sure this was like this for Taken, like it kind of was a vacation that we were all working real jobs to save up money to go tour, because we just wanted to tour, not to make money, like not to be rock stars. Like it was like, we just want to go conquer the country and have fun and like just destroy little YMCA halls or whoever will let us play. Like,
right. Totally. It didn't matter.
No.
But the thing that I also found so, I guess, awesome about your band was the fact that it was like, because you guys, you guys didn't fit in with anybody. Like
No.
What you guys did was so, I guess, left of center of what was, there's elements of it that were obviously rooted, like you said, in the sort of, hardcore and punk and the metallic hardcore that you were influenced by. But then it was just this weird, amalgamation of melody and weird time structures. And so it was one of those things where it seemed like the farther you guys got into it, the more you kind of pushed into it. You like leaned into it, where it's like, okay, we're not this band, so we're going to continue to like go that direction. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think in the beginning it was just fun to see that we could, I think, at least for me, like my experience being in bands were always in these very song structure, melodic, rock songs, so to go into this band that literally was just writing these epic, A, B, C, D, E, F, G kind of songs, linear, no repetition songs, was just so fun in the beginning that I didn't care what it sounded like. And then eventually, I think when we signed to Eulogy, it was just so innocent, like Transient Effects was so pure. It was just totally like, we recorded that in like 3 days, and like, I think just thinking back about the amount of thought and things that went into it was just so little, just so much. Like it was just so based on like vibe and like, oh yeah, we like this. Okay, remember this. Like that sounds cool. Like whatever. And then Mike and I would just hone in on the lyrics together and be like, okay, like again, I feel like so much of that stuff is like I can't remember feeling anxiety or pressure or anything like that, or writer's block. It was all just exciting and fun. And even as that band, as we started getting like, I guess I wouldn't say we got popular, but in our minds, it was like, oh my God. Like when they told us like a certain amount of like albums had shipped, like our minds exploded, like, cause we couldn't wrap our heads around like the idea of 10,000 CDs being out there was like, that's insane. We're
Right.
like so huge. What are you talking about? You like
Totally.
Are you kidding me? So yeah, I think by the time we made the Cairo CP, I think there was starting to become artistry. I mean, there was like a thought of like, of evolving and changing. And like, at that point, Mike really was interested in singing too, you know, and obviously bands like, Thursday and Cave In and, Poison the Well, like there was just a lot of bands influencing our mindset at that point. And then of course the bands like Deftones, who were just always there, and, you know, Quicksand and all that stuff. It started seeping in. Tool, like all those bands, kind of like we started leaning a little bit more to like the alternative, like almost post-hardcore stuff, because I think that was where we were always influentially. And, you know, and I think also obviously just beating the road on the US over and over again and playing all these different cities and hearing the same riff over and over again. You're just like, oh God, not that again.
Right.
You know, just like eventually that, which I think is so poignant, you know, like you don't understand that something is beat to death. At that, in that time era, you don't understand that something is bad until you go out on tour and you hear it in every city done horribly a ton of times. And then you're like, oh yeah, that's cliche. That's crappy. I don't want to do that anymore. Like
Right.
we want to try something else.
It's true. It's true. It definitely gets the mirror gets reflected right back to you, where it's just like, oh yeah, like that's what's happening.
Yeah. And another thing, just to think about that whole acid experience, like that, I think the kind of thinking I was getting immediately was, if an alien spaceship came down, how would I explain to them that my band is different than that crappy band playing that crappy riff right now? I don't think I could.
Right. You're like, I don't have 20 minutes to explain the nuance of what it is that we're doing.
Yeah, nuance is just completely irrelevant when you're in that situation and explaining it to the aliens.
Right. And so then obviously, you know, this day forward disbanded, and then obviously you know, you guys started to put together Circa. I don't need to recount the history there. But one of my favorite things that I've heard you express on either multiple interviews or I've read it, and then obviously knowing you guys as individuals, where you know, there's Anthony, and then there's the rest of the guys. And the notion of you know, just this image of all four of you, you know, standing together after a show, and then having a fan come up to you and just like literally not care about you at all as a human being, and just be like, yeah, where's Anthony? Like where is he? Can you point in the right direction? I knew that obviously there was going to be some of that leading into, you know, the band's inception and obviously your first EP and record. Was it a learning curve that you had to be like, oh yeah, so that's like that's the way that things are, not like you were looking for that sort of, you know, credit, so to speak, because, you know, you couldn't meet four people who could care less about being in the front of a band, but yeah. So I don't know. I just find it a very interesting dynamic, because you know, in any other band, if there was one other person that like wanted any sort of spotlight, this combination wouldn't work, you know? And so that's why I think it's just an interesting thread I wanted to pull on.
Yeah. You know, I think it's funny. I mean, I guess like, I think it really was, again, like just that battleground of punk rock and hardcore, and just really knowing that experience, and which I think, you know, this day forward's trajectory was very humbling in a lot of ways. And by the time Circa started, I think you're just looking at, Anthony included, like 5 really humble individuals. And at that point, even when Anthony did start to get, you know, more and more attention in that way, you know, from day one, we wanted to be a rock band, and we wanted to be a band that had that kind of frontman and that kind of personality. And, you know, I think Anthony just is who he is, and he performs the way he performs, and he attracts the way he attracts, and that, you know, there's just a certain natural essence that is happening in that whole situation that you'd kind of have to be a total dickhead to really like obsess over it and get upset about it, because you really just can't. There's nothing you can do. There's no control over that. And when it comes down to it, like you said, the other four of us are, you know, we're not even equipped to handle that kind of attention. Like, you know, it just really, we're pretty awkward people. Like, I think even Brendan, who is pretty good socially, and I think even over the years has like kind of wound up, you know, getting a bunch of fanfare, just as far as like being recognizable and like, yeah, like, I don't know. I think all of us are just kind of fine with however we are. And even like to like Steve is somebody who really like almost runs from it. He doesn't want it at all. Like, he's just really not looking for that kind of attention. Yeah, it just works. I mean, I think in general, even at our height, which is pretty much now, I mean, like, there's not a lot of ego in the band, in our decisions, in our creative sessions. There's just there's a pretty big lack of ego, which I think is very, very due to all of us coming from that world and knowing that it's really, don't kid yourself. Like, you're just another dude playing music, and we're lucky, and that's the way we all look at it. And even Anthony, who has, you know, a bajillion million followers on whatever platform you want to pick. I mean, for as popular and loved as he is, you know, he's an extremely humble, normal person who can get overwhelmed just like anybody else. And like, ultimately, I just think like we all look at it with gratitude, and maybe even like there's like a grain of salt aspect of like, you know, this isn't why we do this, you know?
Right. The other shoe could drop at any point, so we're fine. Absolutely. We're here right now. Yeah. No, I like that attitude. And Circa, like you said, I mean, obviously you guys always intended to, be a rock band and not really specifically aligning yourselves to one scene or anything like that.
Sure.
And you constantly are challenging every record. You keep pushing your fan base to be like, all right, you guys gonna follow us here? You guys gonna follow us here?
Yeah.
We all agree that reducing carbon emissions is a good thing, and once again, Toyota is leading the way. We hear a lot about fully electric vehicles, and Toyota has them, with more on the way, but we also know a BEV is not for everyone. Whether it's because of cost, range, or concerns about finding a charging station when you need it, plus the raw materials used to manufacture batteries are limited. Enter Beyond Zero, Toyota's vision for a carbon-neutral future, in vehicles and manufacturing plants too, in the years ahead. The materials used to make just one long-range battery for an EV could be used to make batteries for 6 plug-in hybrids or 90 gas-electric hybrids. That's why Toyota's position today is electrified, diversified, empowering you to choose how to reduce your own carbon footprint with the vehicle that's right for you, a hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery EV. So shop, learn more, and get details at toyota.com/Beyond Zero. Toyota. Let's go places.
When you get a new car or a new home, your first reaction might be to say things like, "Oh yeah," or "I can't believe it," or "Booyah." But what you really want to say is the one thing that can get you the help you need. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. State Farm is there with coverage you need for your car, your home, and even boats, motorcycles, RVs, and other things that matter to you. With a State Farm agent, you know someone is there to help you choose the coverage you need. With so many coverage options, it feels good knowing you can find what fits for you. And when you need ways to get help, State Farm gives you options there too. In person or on the phone, with your local agent, or on statefarm.com, or their award-winning app. State Farm lets you do things your way. So, when you need help protecting the things that matter most, remember to say, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
It's never too late. Never too late to earn a degree. Never too late for a comeback. Between your busy career and taking care of a family, it can feel like there's never a good time to go back to school. But your time is now. Time to start your comeback with Purdue Global. As Purdue's online university for working adults, Purdue Global is dedicated to supporting adults like you who know it's time to earn the recognition you deserve. You have the experience, you have the knowledge, it's time to get credit for the work you've done. You can balance work, family, and everything in between while earning your degree. It's time to move forward in your career, for your family and for yourself, with a degree you're proud of, a degree that employers will recognize and respect. You're worth this investment in yourself to earn a degree you deserve. It's never too late. Never too late to go back to school and come back stronger with an education you can trust. Now is the time for your comeback. Start yours today at purdueglobal.edu.
Do you, I know this is kind of a maybe a convoluted question, but it's like, do you guys feel like you pushed through that well, where you guys were able to obviously still continue to bring people along? Or were there moments where it was like, obviously, say when you were on the major and obviously they wanted you guys to exist in this sort of, weird, like, oh yeah, maybe you guys could write something that's a little hookier, like be less challenging. Were there those moments of like, well, I guess maybe we could do that in some respects, because obviously you could do that from a songwriting perspective, but
Sure.
yeah. So I don't know. I realize it's a convoluted question, but it's just kind of like that thought process where it's just like, oh yeah, do we continue to challenge our fan base? Like, obviously that's the decision you've made, but
I think I think it's a great question, and I think it's hard. It's hard to even like pinpoint what choices were actually made and what just were like natural things. And when I think back to like the example you gave when we were on Atlantic and stuff, the ironic part is that I think a lot of the stuff was, I think they knew. They were very sensitive to where we were coming from day one, because they knew, it wasn't an easy thing to get us on the label by any means, because, we were talking to like 10 different labels at that point, and it was a bit of a slugfest at that point, between a few different labels, and they knew what we wanted, and it was very much so to have creative control. There were even labels that were offering more money and less control, and just stuff like, we really kind of like just drove it home that like we're looking for a home, we're looking for a label to accept us as who we are and to help us grow, because at that point, we were not by any means done growing, and we knew that, but we didn't know in what direction we were going to go, and we wanted whoever we were going to work with to kind of support that, whichever way it went. To their credit, I really feel like Atlantic put very little pressure on us. They liked being involved to a certain extent, as far as like when we were making the record. They liked, being our A&R guys loved being involved in the conversations of which songs would stay on, which songs would go off, and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it was always our decision. And even before that, when we were in the writing process, I mean, I remember very specifically them coming to visit us and asking, like going around and asking everyone how they felt. And I remember specifically saying that I felt like we didn't even have one song. And at that point we had like 12. I remember the whole room, like just kind of like whipped their head around and looked at me and like they wanted to kill me. Right. But I was just being honest, because at that point, as I was saying earlier with all those other examples, like not feeling that anxiety, not feeling that like kind of creative, like ponderance, like that was not the case in that time. In my head, I was very much so thinking and almost like overthinking everything. And I really was looking, I wanted us to write the best record of our career. I wanted to write like something that was challenging and different, and I wanted to become better songwriters, and I think everyone wanted to. I think I just had like, I don't know, maybe I was just a bit of an asshole. I don't even know how to really describe it. I just remember feeling like we needed to start over, and we actually, in fact, kind of did wind up starting over. And I think we just wrote, I mean, all of us love Blue Sky Noise, but I especially like really, when I think about just the progress that we made on that album, songwriting wise, I think is just so crucial to the rest of our career, because we wouldn't have known otherwise, and we would have always been kind of like trying to like take more steps in that direction. And I think the fact that we kind of leaped to this a little like more advanced songwriting level at that point, we were able to then go more difficult and more strange earlier, like right immediately after that, we opened a record with like a 7.5 minute song, and it was just, I think we had to make that record in order to kind of rebel against it the next time,
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. You had to make that step in order to, continue to progress. Otherwise you would just kind of get locked into what you already had been doing.
Yeah, or we would just always have been trying to progress to that point. Just it would have taken a lot more time. But I think, now it's like, I don't know. It's just so funny how when a new record, especially during that time frame, was coming out, we projected all these things onto how the audience was going to perceive it and how they're going to take it and whatever, and like, oh, this is the first on a major and all that stuff. The funny thing is like the only people that actually gave a shit what label we were on were like the 10 people that all came from the hardcore scene and the punk rock scene. You're like, right, everyone else is like, what's a record label? Like no one even like knows. Like they're just like, whatever. Like, okay, so when's your album coming out? Like, show me where the pre-order link is. Like, I don't care. Like,
yeah, where do I sign up?
Yeah, like, yeah. So I don't know, this like impending backlash that we were like, we didn't give much thought to it, but like we'd have talks about it once in a while, just like, well, I guess this is our last record. Like, no one's gonna like us after selling our souls, and obviously kidding, but I mean, we never knew exactly what was gonna happen, and then. I remember our first show back from that record, just like the loudest sing along of our entire career to get out and being like, oh, well, they like it.
Yeah. Oh, we're okay. Yeah. We're not in a bad place.
We're good.
The last two things I would hit on were more specifically geared towards your personal life was you seem to build, a community around your art, because like obviously you've been an artistic person for the duration of your life as far as the expression through your music, but then obviously also in graphic design and all the other things that you've done over time, but then it seems now, especially over the past couple of years, you're really trying to I guess bridge that gap between the consumer of an art and then obviously the artist, the creator in and of itself.
Sure.
It just seems I don't know. It seems interesting. Basically, it seems like you're developing a fan base for your own art in a similar way that you would obviously do for a band. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like you're having that direct communication with people. Whereas I know a lot of people view art as being like this. Oh, it's this thing I look at on a wall, and then that's kind of the end of the discussion. So I don't know. Is that kind of the approach you're trying to build more of a community, I guess?
I think. I think that's so funny that you say that. I mean, I think I'm always learning. I'm learning a lot through other people about how other people view, what I'm doing, because a lot of times I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm just kind of trying to follow intuition. But ultimately, I'm just really trying to grow as an artist and learn and become better. And ever since I made the decision years ago to start sharing my visual work. That was just kind of a commitment to like show the process, show the awkward stages, let it change, let old stuff fall away, like introduce new stuff proudly, like don't worry about it, and just kind of keep moving, and ultimately like just let that side of myself grow its own little fan base or community, as you put it. Like, yeah, totally. And I have had epiphanies lately where it really is like me going like, oh wow, like I thought I was ready for this experience a few years ago in painting, but like ultimately now I will compare that to being in, I'm only like midway through this day forward's career as far as my painting goes. I'm not even in the demos of Circa phase yet.
Right. Right.
Which is just interesting because I really can see so many parallels to it, and how you climb a mountain and then you realize it was just a hill and there's a whole another huge mountain right ahead of you, and you're like, oh, okay, gotta keep going. And I think it's like visual art, especially painting and fine art, like going into that world has been insane experience and very trying. Some of it is like, some of it I would say is almost, more difficult and excruciating when it's at its lows, because it's solitary, and you don't have like four other guys to kind of commiserate with when shit sucks. You're
Right.
you're just alone, and you're dealing with that. And ultimately, I'm an outsider to that world, big time. I'm becoming more of an insider because I'm getting experience, but I'm an outsider in the way that this day forward was very much so like a group of outsiders, and not knowing what the hell we were doing or where we belonged and what was okay and what wasn't. And I think as I get older, I start to embrace that ideology more of like, it's okay to not know what's right in an industry or in a profession or in a scene or whatever, and it's okay to like kind of make it up as you go. And half the time you find that there's a lot of other people just kind of looking for somebody to do that because they're sick of something else. And I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's awesome because it's great to see people in bands, because obviously like your identity is so wrapped up with the band that you play in, and it's like for you to be able to establish things outside of the context of whatever it is you were creating on one hand, it's like, well, no, I'm more than just that,
Absolutely. And I think for me, it's like a beast with many heads, or whatever the saying is. I mean, it's one of those things where, sure, it's really nice to have this like other kind of side career when the going's good. It's like you sell out of a print run or something, and you're like, wow, this is so cool. I'm so lucky to have this. This is amazing. And then there's other times where, like for instance, recently just did like another solo show in San Jose, and it was about 25 new paintings, and it was planned for about 11 months or so in advance, but I also had another split solo show that happened in that time, and then Circa was touring about like 7 months out of that 11 months, so it was very, very busy. And then I'm home and wound up just kind of isolating for anywhere from 10 to 14 hours a day, just painting constantly, preparing for this show. And you're doing it day after day, and you realize like, okay, like this isn't like a circus show where we have a guarantee, like there is no guarantee. Like there's no guarantee that any of these paintings are going to sell. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to like it. There's no guarantee that anyone's going to come to this opening. So there's a lot of that self-doubt from the early days that can kind of pop in, when you're on tour with your first band and you're like, I hope somebody shows up. I hope people show up. And man, I am so appreciative when people show up, and just so appreciative that people like my art enough to want to buy it. And that's just very, there's a certain emotional aspect to that, just practice of making art and selling it, that I'm just very, very grateful. And I love making work, and I love, there's nothing better for me. Like I've never been a hoarder of my own stuff. I love getting rid of it. I'll sooner give away something than like hold on to it and hold out for money. Like I love the look on someone's face when they get something that they're stoked about and they put it up in their house. Like that's just so cool. So,
right. You're like, I would never have expected that.
No, never in a million years.
Obviously, this is the last thing I'll hit on, where the transient lifestyle that you obviously live is it's difficult to maintain relationships, and obviously I know that you've gone through divorce, and I know that other members in the band have also gone through that as well. Reflecting on like your experience, where is it one of those things where you like basically long and short of it, what do you take away from that? Like what sort of lessons did you obviously learn from that either were directly related to you being in a band, or if it was just separate from that and just being like, okay, that relationship that I was in was not right and it did not fit?
Sure. I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, I think if you go through a divorce and you don't have an answer for what did you learn, then you should probably never get into another relationship, because I mean, regardless of whose fault something was, or regardless of like any of the he said, she said, whatever, you have to own that, that thing coming to an end. You have to own that whole kind of trajectory. And I don't like to look at it as a failure, but essentially like, your marriage didn't work and you had to end it. And the plan was not to end it. So you have to kind of come to terms with that. And, so for me, I'm so grateful for that experience, actually. That was my first real super traumatic thing to happen to me as an adult. And, going to therapy and just kind of the whole process of healing from that was just completely life-changing, and I mean, there's definitely a huge aspect of like that relationship just wasn't right. I mean, that's without, no doubt. But, I will say that, I think no matter what you do for a living, that it's going to play a role in your relationship. And when you do something as odd as travel many months out of the year on most years, and you are, I'll even go as far to say as just being a highly creative person, someone who's consumed by their own thoughts in that way, and kind of just almost always working in your brain. It takes a very specific kind of person to be understanding to that. And it also, not to put it all on her by any means, like, I think it's not that she wasn't even understanding of that, but I think like it takes, if you're an artist or if you're a creative person in a relationship, especially in a marriage, and, I'm sure Anthony would be able to speak much better than I would as far as like being a father or something like that. You would know, you split that up a lot. You really have to make some changes. You have to make some alterations in how your energy and your attention gets divided. And, sometimes, I mean, I will say, I'll be honest, that's why I'm not a father. That's why at least to this point so far, I've chosen not to have children, because I do feel like there's an aspect of me that is a little too selfish. And, I think that even just the amount of time I spend, split between art and music, sometimes even that's too much for my girlfriend, who like, and I really have tried to learn my lesson from when I was married before. I mean, we had all kinds of other problems, but I will say that like that one of them is definitely that I had a tough time drawing the line and being like, okay, work is over. Like it's time to, give some attention to my other, I think that, yeah, it's definitely two-sided. You need someone who understands. I think trust is huge, which that was a big problem in my past relationship, and a very non-existent problem in my current one. And I think that says a lot. I mean, if you trust the person you're with and they trust you, especially if you're going to be away a lot, like, that can be a very contentious thing for some people. And
yeah, no, it's the thing that I think a lot of people, especially from relationships, where it's like you need to, how most of us obviously view the work that we do as work. But then obviously when you apply the creative aspect of it, that, somehow a lot of people can't view that as work as well, because they're just like, oh, well, what are you doing? Like, you're dicking around your guitar, or you're painting, or whatever, whatever your creative pursuit is. But then ultimately you have to, like you said, in your own head, be like, all right, well, the work that I put into my relationship, should be obviously equally as important, if not more important. And like
absolutely.
Because I always find it always frustrates me where people act like they're in sort of the easiest relationship of all time. They're just like, oh yeah, it's like, dude, it's like never been a problem. And it's like, well, I don't even think you're challenging one another. You're not even like probably talking or communicating. It's like a good relationship should have that sort of
push and pull.
Yeah, like that friction that will help you obviously grow as an individual, and vice versa. And so I just like the way that I like the way that you frame that, where it's just like, the work needs to be what it is, but then you do need to draw the line at some point and be like, okay, well, this is where the work ends and the work on my relationship begins, or whatever.
Right. And I will say, like, even if I had done the majority of the things that I've learned from that past, and like have kind of made a huge step to change, even if that would have happened, I don't think the relationship would have been saved. But that's just another one of those reasons why I am so thankful for the experience, because like it's things that I probably would have never changed otherwise, and so it's very, I think it's very important that I kind of keep that in mind. And, my current partner, like she went through a divorce as well. So that's a huge touchstone for us. We both understand that perspective in a very personal way, and kind of both played similar roles in our past relationships and went through similar things. So, we try to really always, because you don't want to constantly reflect on those experiences, especially the more painful aspects of them. But I think it's really important to kind of keep them at least accessible in your memory, so that you can, have a reference of like, oh, has this happened before? Like, have I done this before? Did I react in this way before? Like, how would I do that now in hindsight? And I mean, just like anything else in life, I think your relationships are, they require work and upkeep, and at least if you want them to grow in a healthy way, it's just the most simple metaphor is that your relationship is a plant and it needs to be watered,
Yep. No, totally. No, I appreciate you laying it all out like that, because I know it's just one of those things. Like, I think a lot of people take just for granted when you've reached a certain level of success, or just like, oh, you're in a touring band and you're doing it and like everything's awesome. And it's just like, well, like we all go through similar difficulties in our lives, and I just think that it's an important thing, like you said, to obviously have learned from it and be able to apply it to obviously the relationship you're currently in. It's great.
Yeah, totally. And I think it across the board, all of us have gone through difficult things over the last few years, and which is kind of the essence of getting older and like just going through life. Things happen, but in the same way that it made me like want to pay more attention in my future relationships, it really hones in on your friendships and your relationships with family and stuff that maybe have been neglected or maybe not healthy. And so that was another thing that people don't immediately think about, how something like a divorce would really impact the way you are with your friends and the way you are with your family. But 100% had such a huge impact on that. And, I think in general, I just think you have to always remember that the people that are important to you, you can't just take them for granted, and you have to make sure they know that they're important. And sometimes that means having a difficult conversation, or, getting in touch when maybe you're too tired or whatever. Like, you have to make that effort. It's the same thing with like your intimate relationships and your creative relationships. It's all kind of like, it all needs upkeep and work.
Yeah, no, it's all the beauty of being human.
That's right.
Well, Colin, I really appreciate you hanging out. This is super fun for me. I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, man, it was a blast. Thanks so much, man.
So that's what's up, right? That's literally the first time I've said, so that's what's up. Yeah, I feel like I need to be a basketball player dunking on somebody and say, that's what's up. But anyways, so that's what's up. But thank you very much to Colin. Thank you very much for the time that he spent in chatting with me and spreading the awareness of the show in general. So the producer, as always, is Tom Richfield, who I've been leaning a little bit less on recently because I've been slacking, so I've been doing a lot of the editing and all that other fun stuff. So if it doesn't sound up to your standards, that's because of me, not because of Tom. Put that on me, please. And the guest next week, I'd like to tease that now, is a gentleman named Mark Palm. He is in a band called Super Crush, but previously played in bands like Black Breath, Go It Alone. Super, super interesting dude, because he does not have a very average outlook on life and has a very distinct voice and pattern that he's kind of gone through his life with. So I can't wait to bring you that conversation. Visit Jabberjaw Media for our podcast network. Visit the show's website, 100wordspodcast.com. And until next week, please be safe, everybody.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Have you heard about Vyvgart? Vyvgart Tegamod Alpha F-Cab? Ask your neurologist if Vyvgart could be right for you. And learn more at Vyvgart.com/learn. That's VYVGART.com/learn. Brought to you by argenx.
So you're saying with Hilton Honors, I can use points for a free night stay anywhere?
Anywhere.
What about fancy places like the Canopy in Paris?
Yeah, Hilton Honors, baby.
Or relaxing sanctuaries like the Conrad in Tulum?
Hilton Honors, baby.
Ooh, what about the 5-star Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives?
Are you gonna do this for all 7,000 hotels and resorts?
When you want points that can take you anywhere, it matters where you stay. Hilton for the stay.
Click the banner to join Hilton Honors for free today.